welcome back to Cinematic Sarcastic, podcast that talks all things movies and television. I'm Natalie, and I'm your host. On today's episode, we are going to talk about Bodkin. Now, depending on where you look, this TV series is listed as either a comedy series or a thriller. This is available on Netflix. I don't know how popular this show is going to be in terms of my audience or whether anyone has heard about this one, but it nabbed me because it's talking about podcasters. So of course I had to sit down and try and watch a few of the episodes. So for anyone who is not familiar with Bodkin, this really has to do, or the story revolves around the main character of Gilbert, who is a true crime podcaster based out of the United States, Chicago specifically, and he travels to Ireland in order to cover the story of 3 people that went missing during the Samhain festival around Halloween, for anyone who is not familiar with that particular holiday. Now, I kind of expected this to... I don't know if I knew of another show that I was expecting this to be like, but I definitely sort of expected this to be more on the humor side because I had really only ever seen it listed as a comedy series until it kind of released. And then now if you Google it, it says thriller, which I guess makes a little bit more sense, though I don't know that I would categorize it as that much either. But basically, the premise is that this person, podcaster Gilbert, played by Will Forte, has an assistant who's just very happy to be there helping him out podcasting. And for some reason that's never, at least in the beginning, ever really explained, there is a legitimate journalist that is sort of assigned to go around on this case with him. And I never quite understood why exactly she was there. She is probably one of the most unlikable characters in the series, and the character's name is Dove, and she is a legitimate, journalist who is very snobby and just feels like it is incredibly beneath her to have to help a podcaster, and she has some obvious history with Ireland and maybe specifically with the town that they're in, but she's just deeply unlikable to me in this. She constantly is just ditching them. She's constantly talking down to them and constantly sort of making the podcaster feel like it's very stupid that he's doing this in the first place. And I kind of, even though I find her deeply unlikable, I sort of understand it because they really, I think, with the character of Gilbert, who is this podcaster, tried to get as close as possible to the character from Ted Lasso, that sort of just over the top, overly friendly, overly positive sort of character, which doesn't necessarily work for him. In Ted Lasso, I feel like it comes across incredibly well because of the situation that he's in. He's trying to motivate his team and sort of keep things lighthearted, but I don't necessarily get the vibe from Ted Lasso, that character, that he is incredibly stupid, whereas the character of Gilbert just comes off as a incredibly stupid American podcaster who is just trying to be lighthearted. He's constantly talking about how everyone in this town with his last name is potentially related to him. And, I have, just as an example, I have a pretty common Hispanic last name. So for me, it's if I hear someone who has the same last name as me, I don't ever think that we're related because it's essentially the last name Smith, everyone has it. So I don't know, I guess I just don't get the joke of him constantly talking about everyone in Ireland with the last name of Powers being related to him. That just seems like a very dumb American kind of way of thinking. And the show in of itself, again, even though I had ever seen it listed as a comedy, I wouldn't list it as a comedy at all. The humor in it is not for me. If there is humor in it, it wasn't particularly funny to me in any instance, or not the kind of comedy that I guess I'm expecting from a show like this. You know, it doesn't have any sort of cheeky humor. It really is just sort of a bit slower and dare I say, a bit dull to watch, a bit boring to watch, considering that the whole thing is like a true crime podcast and they're trying to solve this murder. And obviously there's a little bit of a subplot going on that Siobhan Cullen, who is the actress who plays Dove, who is the legitimate journalist, she kind of is trying to unwrap a legitimate story. She doesn't think that their story is kind of worth looking into. And so she's trying to get to a deeper, better, quote unquote, kind of real, real life journalistic story that can be taken seriously. But all of that is just incredibly boring. It doesn't win for me. I didn't necessarily find it to be like a thriller. So it isn't like a true crime series where you are asking like who done it. It's a bit more silly. Like it does sort of in some instances kind of remind me of Ted Lasso, but like Ted Lasso from Wish. If that's a thing, like where it's not really very funny, but it is kind of just ridiculous and silly, but slow at the same time, if that makes sense. So this one is not a win for me, unfortunately. I was hyped about it because it was about podcasters and I thought it would be kind of a fun adventure to go on with another podcaster who was looking into true crime. That is not my space, but who's looking into true crime and kind of taking that seriously. Because for me, I guess I don't understand why they didn't go a little bit more serious with it, considering that there are true crime podcasters who have solved real life cases that like police departments had come to dead ends on, and these podcasters could just dig in and people, talked to them differently and have solved cases. So I guess I don't understand why they didn't go a little bit more serious about it, especially considering that the series overall was a lot more serious than it was comedic. But they went the joke sort of silly, ridiculous way with this podcaster, and that's fine. But it is just not for me at the end of the day. So those are my thoughts on Bodkin. I would love to know what you guys thought. If you have watched this one, subscribe to join the Movie Nerd family, and I hope to see you in the next episode.